Why hello. This is the third time I'm filming this video, but welcome to my channel. If you do not know me, hi, my name is LolitaMilena. I do absolutely anything I want on my channel, and today I'm reviewing Quiet on Set, the dark side of kids television. Now, I watched all 4 episodes of this documentary on HBO Max. I would highly recommend it if you grew up watching Nickelodeon during its heyday of the late 90s to the mid 2010s. So this episode, I'm just going to cover episode 1. And episode 1 is by far the most tame of this documentary. It all centers around the Nickelodeon creator, Dan Schneider. Now, Dan Schneider was known for creating hits such as iCarly, Drake and Josh, Victorious, The Amanda Show, all that. If you grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s, you watched at least one of his shows. It all begins with Dan Schneider accepting his Lifetime Achievement Award at the Kids' Choice Awards, designed by Nick. And then we jump into Fetishland. I wish I was kidding. I am in fact not kidding. The amount of times they showed a, 15-year-old Ariana Grande doing very inappropriate things for an underage kid, it kind of felt dirty, and not in the sense of, no duh, this is something that should not be on television that anyone can watch across the world, but it just kind of felt a little bit of exploitative of a huge name such as Ariana Grande, and she was shown so many times. Spoiler alert, she's never brought on to be interviewed for this documentary. So if you've ever watched a documentary in your life, you do know that there are some dramatizations of what happened, and there are also some pretty dramatic people in a documentary, especially one that's centered around Hollywood and kids Hollywood at that. But there are just some people in this documentary, especially the first episode, that I just cannot get behind. I can't do it because you have people that are journalists, interviewers, you have the parents of the child actors, and then you have some of the child actors themselves. A lot of the insiders and the journalists really irk me in this doc, and I don't say that very often, but they'll be describing some very grotesque things that a child should not have to go through. And they're saying it all with a smile and this cadence that tells me they may not even realize that they weren't characters. Those kids had to go home with all that stuff weighing down on their shoulders. And if they do realize that, then shame on them. For those in my audience that maybe didn't watch Nickelodeon, hi, I can relate because we did not have cable, extended cable, when I was growing up. So the only time I could watch shows like Victorious and iCarly were if I was at a relative's house or if I was in the hospital. So I wasn't always caught up to date on the pop culture surrounding these kids shows, especially with people my age, but it's just a lot. So with Nickelodeon, the whole demographic was, it was different than the Disney Channel. It was different than Cartoon Network because Nickelodeon made the model of,
no one had ever really done sketch comedy starring kids for kids.
They said basically kids are always at the forefront. All the parents that just don't get it are pushed to the background of these shows. If I keep changing camera angles, it's because I have to keep rotating my phone. My camera's broken. Anyway, you don't care about that. You care about crazy Hollywood producers. We start in the 90s with All That. I didn't watch All That. I didn't watch The Amanda Show. Those were before my interest in television really got going. So all of this was kind of new information for me. It may not have been new information for people that were watching the doc. So with All That, it was Dan's experimental phase of this television for kids by kids. And so with all of these kids going through this show, very few adults were on the set with them acting. There were a lot of adults on the set. And with that, all of the parents in the doc would talk about the weight that these kids were carrying on their shoulders to please Dan and make Dan happy because you wanted to make Dan happy. My question is, why are we putting all that pressure onto 10-year-olds? When I was 10, I was anxious over my multiplication table test that I was having on Thursday. Why do I have to worry about making a what was 30 or something? Quick disclaimer and trigger warning, because the doc couldn't have been bothered to put one, and the one they did put was so not even close to what they should have been warning you about. The amount of adult innuendos and the amount of adult intimate activities that they wrote for these kids to act out is astronomical, and it blows me out of the water at how no one cared, the higher execs wise. No one cared. Because why is a 12-year-old little boy, I can't remember his name, I'm so sorry. He played this superhero character, and he's in this leotard that's also a very, very crappy thin material, and he's a grown boy. And he shoots out goopy fluids onto one of the rare adult actors on the set that day. And mind you, it was a woman that he was onto. Why did that make it onto television? Also, some of the characters' names, how did those make it onto television? You're telling me, listen, I know we didn't have Google in 1995, but you're telling me no one could just ask if it sounded like a weird name, sounded like a weird word. Why are we just saying, yeah, you know, oh Dan, coming up with wacky words. Now we move on to his bread and butter, his money-making beauty, Amanda Bynes, at the ripe age of 10 years old. She is recruited for all that after he saw her at a comedy stand-up club in Los Angeles. One of the girls heard that she was performing and said, hey, you got to come see her work. She's really, really funny. And her specialty was comedic timing, physical comedy. That was her whole thing. And she was really, really good for like 10 years old. The moment Dan talks to Amanda's father immediately sells his daughter on a golden platter to this guy under the guise of fame and fortune. Let me get into a little smidgen of how Hollywood works when it comes to child actors. Child actors, it's a lucrative business for kids to start making money for their families, especially kids that may come from middle to lower middle class homes, especially for children's television. So there are laws in place to protect kids, but there are also a lot of loopholes that come with laws. Loop-de-loop and pool. We have laws in place to protect kids. We have the minimum of start and the maximum hours that they can work. We also have the education laws to where they have to be continuously pursuing their educations when they're under the age of 18. So when Nickelodeon wanted to make this whole TV for kids by kids, they still had to do schoolwork. And they would only have them be doing the minimum of 3 hours worth of work a day. So while all the kids were chilling and, you know, doing their ABCs, Amanda is not with them ever. And the adult starts saying in the doc how, yeah, Dan and Amanda would be in a room locked because, you know, creative juices, creative flowing, you know, you gotta get it while it's ripe and fertile. No. Why are we letting this man be alone with a child? Guys, you're gonna find out real quick that I didn't side with literally any adult. And I'm actually in the minority on that one. And of course you hear it. You hear all of these adults. I'm talking the staff writers, and I'm talking the crew members, directors, the camera ops, the PAs. It was always the same excuse, as if they all kind of like sat around in a room and were like, okay guys, how do we wash our hands the cleanest with this disgusting mop water that we've got going? I know. He is the godfather of Hollywood. We couldn't disappoint him. We can't disappoint Dan. We'll never work in Los Angeles again. Because kids television rules the industry. Yes, people have networks. Yes, people know people in the industry. However, as corrupt as the industry is, as corrupt as any industry can be, there are good people in it. And there are good people in high positions, even back in the wild, wild west of 1990. I really don't like a lot of these adults. You'll hear that the common consensus is that everyone acted like Dan owned Nickelodeon and he owned children's television, and screw it, he owned Los Angeles as a whole. He is the mayor, he is the governor, he is the president. And to me, it's not so much that he had this amazing reverse psychology power over everyone he came across. The man's a magician. The man's a snake charmer, apparently. When it comes to talking to him and just how great at manipulation he is, it's more so that Nickelodeon's execs at the time were just lazy and saw that he was giving them more money in their profits than what they were giving him in budget, and that's why they let a lot of it slide. Also, do not mistake that I am blaming the kids in any of my little rants. I am not blaming the kids, not one bit. I am putting all of the blame on the people who were well into adulthood. They know how the industry works, they know how business works, and they know how to read when someone's an ass. And they still did nothing. I wish I remembered the name of the writers, the 2 women writers. I'll get to them. Let's get to those writers, shall we? I don't remember their names. We're gonna call them Dummy 1 and Dummy 2. We have Dummy Uno and Dummy Dos. They are the only women writers on the staff of All That and then The Amanda Show, taking place in the 90s. And yes, I understand that in the industry, especially in the 90s, it was really, really easy for misogynistic men to bypass hiring women in a creative arts industry because art is subjective. And you can just say, your writing is not as good as Jim's writing. Yeah, Jim just figured out how to finish his ABCs. Yeah, Jim doesn't know his left from his right, but his writing's really, really good. It's so much better than yours. So I understand their frustrations, right? What I don't understand is they were the ones that noticed that he was locking himself in a room with a minor and saying, yeah, it was a little weird. But, you know, Dan also split the salary between the 2 of us, and we found out through the Writers Guild that that's a no-no. So we had to draw our line there. And that just really proves that they are trying to paint themselves as these victims, in which they are, because they do talk about some horrific bets that Dan would put them through. But you're a grown adult. You're an adult. You have a mortgage. You pay taxes. You can leave, like, at any time, honestly. And I know that's a horrible thing to say. However, it's kids' television. Bright as the sun that these kids are going through things, and the jokes, you know, are way too adult. Mind you, I have no problem with adult jokes in kids' television. The first 4 seasons of SpongeBob, fire. Wonderful. I still quote them to this day. But it was a good ha-ha for the adults, and not making a abortion joke when it was actually revealed decades later that the poor kid had actually gone through one. Ejaculation jokes? Really? Of girls onto other girls? Foot fetishes? Guys? No one said, hey, Dan, maybe let's reel it in a little bit, buddy. This isn't Brazzers. So this episode does wrap up with the 2 women writers. It was around season 2 of The Amanda Show, and they had enough. He was making bets and then not upholding the money for the bets, like $20. They drew the line not at the children having to go through the writing. They didn't draw the line at Amanda clearly going through some horrible things. They didn't draw the line at going against the laws protecting children in workplaces. They drew the line at not making enough money as writers, and they tried to sue him. I exited out at the end of the doc, so I don't know what the end conclusion was to that lawsuit, and honestly, I don't care. Because they saw this going on for not 1 season, but 2 seasons of a show, and then a whole show before that he was clearly not in a right mind to be anywhere near these kids, and putting them through mental torment on like a Fear Factor version for kids, and keeping the parents away from the sets. They wouldn't let their parents be on the set while filming because it would disrupt the creativity of the kids. We had a child actor in the film that I was in. His mom was with him like this, and our set was safe as can be. So I can only imagine what could be going through your head To see the parents being put in the green room and never being allowed to be on the set with their children as the cameras are rolling, and the director, you all have been on sets before because you got there eventually to Nickelodeon, and you're telling me that you didn't lean over to like Billy's parents and say, hey, you actually can go in there. Like, even though like this intern who gets paid peanuts, the shells, even though he tells you can't, the law is that you have to. No one told one adult, and you're telling me no adult questioned why they couldn't be with their kids? Some as young as 8 years old? So the episode essentially wraps up with the two women leaving Nickelodeon. I don't know what the end result was of that lawsuit. Episode 2 gets into the parents. It gets into the parents of some of the child actors, and there is just one that I just... So if you want to see that episode, please feel free to let me know in the comments. I will gladly do it. I have all of my notes here, and I would love to tell you just how much I despise every adult, even the ones that I see a lot of people who watch the doc root for and say we're the best out of all of them. They weren't. So please let me know if you'd like to see that. Comment it down below if you would like to see episode 2, my review of it. Also, please give me a follow and give the video a like. It actually does help me out. I checked out YouTube's algorithm, and it turns out it does help the channel. You can also follow me on other social media. I post tons of different content all over, from TikTok to Instagram and Patreon. Patreon is a great place. It's a more intimate, small group of people where I can chat with you much easier that way. I also have stuff to save you money in my description box, along with merchandise and codes and books that I've written. It's just all fun stuff down there. So with all that being said, I will see you all later. Have a nice day / night.